So, good evening and welcome to Dusty Feet and another one of our special series episodes, The Sons of the Father. It's March 9th, 2023, and we're discussing The Chosen, created by Dallas Jenkins. This episode, we will be talking about Season 1, Episode 5, The Wedding Gift. So, during this series, my dad, John Warren, my brother, Jim Warren, and of course myself, will be chatting about and we'll be sharing things that have impacted us along our journey. So, welcome to the Sons of the Father. And we have Outside the Class, where we want you to review the material before we start chatting about it. It's kind of like homework. We're still in the Matthew series with Tim Mackey. We try to keep these to around 15 minutes or so, easy to catch, and even easier to catch up on. I do link all the videos for each week in advance on TheDustyFeet.com on the Outside the Class page. And those videos, they premiere every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. In the description below are links to all of the audio, video, and source documents that we use here in the Dusty Feet. We want to make sure that any material we use here is properly credited to those folks who work so hard to bring it to us. Without their efforts, the learning we do here does not happen. Don't forget to subscribe. Click that bell icon if you want a reminder. And as always on the Dusty Feet, this is a place we can safely explore the endless ways of God and interconnection of His creation. Where belief understandings may be challenged, divine misunderstandings may exist, and traditional teachings might falter as we pursue connection, context, and community with God and each other here in an environment of grace and love. So here we go with some more Sons of the Father on the Dusty Feet. And here's our double entendres. We are the sons of our Father as we are all sons of the Father. So
Amen.
once again, something I want to reference up front. Sometimes issues can arise from discussions like these and the assumptions that we have on the others that are listening. Okay. It is unintentional. But if you don't understand or have questions concerning something we've discussed, something we've talked about, a point we brought up, please feel free to comment down below and we'll respond as best we can. Or you're more than welcome to send an email to bob@thedustyfeet.com. That's bob@thedustyfeet.com. And sometimes that's an easy way to just ask a question more personally, private. Yeah, it isn't for everybody to see. So, that said, gents, it's season 1, episode 5, The Wedding Gift. Ought to be interesting. So,
Mm-hmm.
Daddy-O, kick us off.
Hi, guys.
Howdy.
Hey. Well, I liked the whole episode, and probably like many others, uh, I could identify in my own life with some of the stories. The opening one I thought had some built-in humor, which was the where they had lost Jesus and they were trekking around looking for him, and people were going, "What are you bothering me for?" I mean, just the same thing that would happen if you were doing it. And then uh, when they found him, and Mary was, very, very uh, relieved when they found him. And Joseph says to Jesus that you're going to owe your mother something, and he says, "What are you talking about?" And says, "For what you did." So you might give her a foot rub. And I thought that would feel good to anybody. But back there, walking around looking for him, walking back several miles,
Hmm.
that would that would have been that would have been a treat. Did it come off? I have no idea. But I remember we used to go to Catalina every year as a family and rent a house for a couple weeks. And the first time we went, uh, we lost Jim. I think back and I think that's a horrible thing. How do we ever happen? At the time, he might have been acting bratty, and I might have left him on purpose somewhere. But so where do you
Yeah.
go when you lose your kid? And you have no idea,
Yeah.
not knowing the island. So we go to the police department, the police station, and we walk in, and who's sitting on the counter in the police station but Jim? He wasn't talking about the Christ and the Gospels, but he was entertaining them with something. So it it just that terrifying feeling though of losing your child. It just
Yeah.
Mm.
beyond. And then what do you say to God? I lost your son.
Yeah.
Sorry, God. I
Whoops.
mean, yeah,
Oops.
it was Joe. It was the husband you gave me.
Yeah.
You're
That
right.
that kind of thing.
I did the same
But
thing in Amsterdam with Cassia. Uh, we were out touring the tulips. Our soccer team was up in Amsterdam to play, and we took a visit of the windmills and the tulips. We were one particular garden, and it was one the same. It was very similar, um, a similar point to Jesus' story, where he's they think he's with somebody else.
Right.
It doesn't mention it in the
Hmm.
movie, and that's fair. In the episode, in the story, in the book, it it mentions that she thought they were with other people in the caravan, and we thought Cassie was with some other people in our group. It was a rather large group. Everybody was taking care of everybody else. It was families up there, and yeah, we had misplaced Cassia. We found her. She was, digging with the tulips, but same idea though, Daddy, with that initial panic
yeah,
of where's my child. But the same
a
thing as
lot,
Jesus. But again, yeah, you're right. She wasn't there sitting at the tulips speaking
a
something. Just
lot of personal stories in
yep,
this one. Uh,
Hmm.
yeah,
with John the Baptist, when old Nico goes down and visits him, and they're miles apart on what they want to talk about. John the Baptist keeps asking Nicodemus questions, and Nicodemus just wants to hear about the miracles. What did I do? That how soon, that what did she tell you? And he says, no, I didn't say anything about you. And he's just and what I thought what John said to Nicodemus, he said, all your life you've been asleep. And I thought, oh, that's interesting because if you're asleep, you're just missing everything. So your mind is asleep. You're not listening to what's going on, and or to anybody else except your little world. And so I thought that was interesting in regards to my own life when Christ was trying to talk to me, and I wasn't listening. And the one more is uh, Peter in Eden when he goes in there and he's telling them about Jesus, and and he's saying, he's kind of pouring his heart out and everything, and just he knows, and she starts crying, and immediately thinks that she's upset, and she wasn't. And
Hmm.
I remember when I went to your mother and told her that, and I really felt like I wanted to go to work for Johnny and Friends for this small
Hmm.
ministry and walk away from a successful business that I'd been doing for 20. What else did I know? I was cutting hair. I didn't know anything
Hmm.
else. And I told her, and I didn't get the full, I don't think the full sentence out of my mouth when she was she started had that look on her face that you guys remember, and and I thought, what's he says? Well, oh, and I told her, I says I can go to school at night, and to barber school, and to work during the day. And she says, I'm going to go to work, so you can go to school. I mean, she just dove right into it. There was never a question about whether I should follow God's
Hmm.
leading or not. And so I'm sure other people have run into the same thing when they watch this series. They just identify with how Jesus works, how God works in our lives. It hasn't changed. Nothing has changed. He's the same God working the same way.
Hmm.
It's us. What was John's line? All your life you've been asleep.
Hmm.
That you're not paying attention to what God is trying to say to you. So that I really, it goes on, but that's enough for now. What'd you think, Jim?
Well, I wanted to title this episode instead of the wedding gift, just more. It just felt like we saw more of Jesus in this episode than we have in the previous episodes. We saw more disciples coming along. Definitely more
Mhm.
questions. Nicodemus asking all kinds of questions, and Thomas as well. Um, there was more wine that was brought about, which was really fun to see. More joy in this one. The other ones have been a little more serious,
Mhm.
and this one had more fun in it. And that was fun to see happen. And then I think too, just more of those shattered expectations of what we think is supposed to be
Mhm.
happening here. And I really, Dad, you mentioned the discussion between Nicodemus and John. I loved how John was playing with him, and it was that sense of John could see that Nicodemus was starting to wake up. He said, "You've been asleep." Nicodemus was waking up. And it's just fun to watch somebody when they're first waking up. It's like, what? Wait, what? And you're just messing with them a little bit till they're fully awake. And that's what he was doing. And sort of, playing with him, but also I think excited about the fact that he was watching a religious leader begin to get it. It's like this isn't the average, false prophet that you see out there. There's something different going on here. And he was baiting him to, like, keep going kind of thing. And I loved seeing that happen. It was fun too. What was interesting is the wedding, we saw next to nothing about the bride and the bridegroom,
Yeah.
because that wasn't the story. The
Mhm.
story was about the wedding and about what Jesus did at the wedding. And so it was fun to see how Dallas kind of painted that picture, and really made it about what was going on at the wedding, because what Jesus did was part of the preparation, and the service going on, not the actual wedding itself. And I think the other thing that I still get a kick out of it, we saw it last time and we saw it this time as well, is when Jesus smiles at his miracles. When he dipped his hand and he pulls it up, and he looks at it and he just smiles. It's like, oh, I did that. That's cool. Um, one last thing that hit me was just the miracle itself. When Jesus said, "Mom, I told you it's not my time yet." But then he looks at Mom and it's like, mm, you can't say no to Ema. That you just can't. Um, he owed her one. Remember, he owed her one from that
Yeah.
previous situation 20 years earlier, and now it's time to pay it back. Okay, Mama, I'll do this for you because I put you in that bad situation. And it just goes back to the fact that God has a plan, but it's always about relationship. And this was about relationship with his mom. This was about him, respecting her
Mhm.
desire. It wasn't inconsistent for God to do something there. It just had, the plan wasn't to do that. That's okay.
Yeah.
God's made adjustments throughout Scripture, when people have said, "Hey, can we make an exception here, God?" And God's done that because it's about relationship. And I love that got brought out in this episode.
It's it's an interesting point. Dallas has been very creative and we'll say liberal with the storytelling, meaning that it's not the miracles, right? These aren't meaning, not the miracles. These are not repetitions of biblical stories.
Mm-hmm.
They are presentations of parts of stories and maybe the backfill or something that would be attached to a story. And we're going to see even more and more of that
Right.
as we go.
Mm.
Like you said, the wedding, we get no mention of the groom. We get a mention. It's about the preparation. It's about all
Mm-hmm.
that stuff, and that's front loaded with a, a bunch of stuff. But one of the interesting parts is he took this time to have this particular one, but he's already done miracles, and people already know some. Yeah, there's already been some that's already happened, where um, our traditional thought is that this is the first one, and so it's interesting that he's taken that little
Mm-hmm.
liberty in that. I don't think that detracts from the importance of the story, but it's just an interesting point. I do like that they have John in prison early. That was the storyline. See, I didn't take the banter with John the way you guys did.
Hmm.
I took it as confrontational from John.
Hmm.
Maybe that's where I'm at now, me personally, where I'm at if somebody's wanting to understand, then I'm looking for a way to engage.
Mm-hmm.
Not the pushback piece. So I just took it a little different. So I like that we can see something and still get a different feel for it,
Mm-hmm.
because John at points was like, and it I get that he's in this jail. Now we have a mix because they allude in the story that it's the Pharisees that have had him tossed there. Okay. In the story that Dallas is telling. Okay. When in reality, he's there because he got confrontational with Herod.
Right.
Okay. So he's not there in that set. That's not why he's there. So any angst you're going to have towards them, this is not driven by it. But the banter that Nico has, which of course this conversation doesn't happen anyways, where this is a
Right.
fictitious conversation anyways.
We think.
But you really you really get a sense of Nicodemus not sure what he's seeing.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
His question is, we have that phrase today. What do we say? Seeing is believing, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure that's the case. And especially with him, he's struggling with this particular part. We're going to see more of that, of course, as this continues. But he's really this is this is one of the big scenes for me, because I just saw Nicodemus really just I I thought I knew, I think I know, but now I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and it is, and it scares him. There's a fear, and again we'll talk about this more a little later, but it, it was good, and of course John is not loving where he's at, and he'd rather be doing other things at this point. So sad enough for that. And your point, Daddio, with Eden, and so we talk about Nicodemus. Okay, so Eden is the flip of that. She's the flip where she sees it, and Simon doesn't. Not to the extent. Simon's da 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 da, and that's when he gets when he
Mhm.
goes and tells her what he's going to do, she starts crying. He immediately thinks he upsets her, and she's, you know, I get it. I knew it. This is the guy, and and then she's excited for him to be involved. But she got it, and she gets it. And we're again with more of her down the road too. But um, that the flip side of that, where you have somebody that for all practical purposes would be the opposite, but she got it. So yeah, Peter's still on his. Simon is still on his um, what he's going to do in this part. He's already starting to figure out what he views as his perceived
Yeah.
role in this. Yeah.
Yep.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
so it's interesting. Yeah. So
Well, that's the part when I said it feels like God's going to continue to shatter those expectations. And we see that's funny, Bob, when you started mentioning, excuse me, um, just that Nicodemus, I thought I knew, I think I know, now I'm not sure. Um, when I was right at the onset of recovery, and had been going to a very, what I would consider legalistic, um, traditional fundamental church, uh, who always criticized charismatic churches because they can't be Christian. They don't believe like we do. Um, and in the process of recovery, spent a good amount of time in a charismatic church, learning a little bit more about what worship looks like differently, and shattering the expectations of what I thought they were like,
Mhm.
and realized they're just as passionate about Jesus as I am. Our expressions might be slightly different, but God tearing away those, you think you know the way I operate. You're only one person in one church in one region, and you don't know that I have a whole world of believers who have different experiences, different upbringings, different cultural contexts in which I work. And that's what I think Nicodemus is going through. So all of a sudden he's realizing God is bigger than what I've learned,
Yeah.
in terms of what he does. And I think Nicodemus is beginning to see that it isn't that what Jesus did was inconsistent with what God does. It's just not what was expected. And I love that that's what's happening, and how God does that to us. He totally shatters our expectations and says, don't think you got me figured out. You don't. And we never will, till we get to heaven and he removes the veil and we're like, oh, that's who you are. And that's just going to be a wow day. In the meantime, we
Amen.
just need to keep, like Nicodemus, keep asking questions, keep seeking, keep looking for what God is doing.
There are a couple more things that this is the one that really jumped out at me as far as storylines and what we've been talking about. Uh, we say we saw the same exact thing. We come away with three different things that we're focusing on. All the personalities of the disciples. This is the first one, like you said, he added two or three more to it. Their personalities coming out and what kind of questions that they're asking, even among themselves. But when they're walking down the road and uh, Peter's talking to the guys, and all of a sudden okay, I know where we're going now. So he walks up there on the way to the wedding. He walks up to Jesus. He says, "And look, I've been thinking about this. I want to put this little plan together, And I remember doing that with the when they hired a new president at Johnny and Friends, and he had been the CEO at Hyundai, uh, and then he retired and he came back, and I remember remember going up to him, look, I got this idea, I've been working on this idea, and he kind of, even though he was, I think he's seven some more years younger than me, puts his arm around me, he goes, we're going to get there, but let's put this and just but all the personalities of
Mhm.
life, and how that's the body of Christ, that we all need each other, instead of, like you say, Jim, with the charismatics, or the the fundamentalists, and all that. It's about Jesus.
Mhm.
it, we don't want to get hung up on these things. The one other scene then, at the wedding, who was Jesus hanging out with? Do you remember that
The
one
kids.
scene?
He was at the
The
kids' table.
kids. He's at the
Yes.
kids' table playing games with the kids, stacking cups or something. And I thought, oh my gosh, there he is again, hanging out with the kids. But when Thomas and Rama were talking, and Jesus had asked Thomas to follow him, and he's like, I mean,
Mhm.
he just, because he's fresh off the miracle,
Yeah.
and he's, his mouth is still hanging open because of that. And his whole plan was to marry Rama and have this successful
Mhm.
uh, marketing business, where they went around and did different, planned parties, and it just turned his life upside down.
Mhm.
That happened to all three of us.
Mhm.
I just told mine, and you guys each have your own stories where you thought you were heading one way, and then you hear this little whisper, in my ear, and you could just, he almost had the same thing that Peter and Eden had with, and that he had with Rama. Well, he said to follow him, and of course she was, well, follow him then. That kind of thing. And it was only that beautiful that we hear it and we do it.
Yeah.
Instead, are you sure? I mean, have you thought this through, Lord? Am I really, you really think that's a good idea? I've been
Mhm.
putting this business together for, on and on and on. So anyway, that was a fun series, a fun episode. I liked it.
That's a tough. Oh no, probably gonna dance into room dividing water here in a second. I do that. Sorry, because that's not my intent. Um, we in the series, it's obvious when he calls you.
Mhm.
Okay, in our lives, not so obvious.
Well,
Okay,
in your
there
life,
might be a few. There might be a few.
yeah.
Um, there might be a few. No, I should say there are a few. I should say might be. There are a few. I think there are less than we think there are. Meaning, I think I have a different view on choice. I do. You both know this, okay? And it makes me different, for sure. That I think part of that is what might be a good idea, and then God can guide, God can nudge. I think part of that point is guidance, um, in that part, and there is a listening to a nudge. To be fair, yeah, that then we can take that choice and go that way. It's in our lives. We wish we had it that easy, where you had somebody come along and say follow. You know, Be- because I want to separate a group here, and I think it's important. I think it's important to be said that you have a what will be they're never going to get to the larger group that is actually part of the biblical narrative. There's a larger group that is part of this disciple group follow that then gets to about 70 actually, and then whittles it down to the 12.
Mhm.
Okay. But the vast majority that are there, the thousands, right? We have two um, renditions of 4 and 5,000,
Mhm.
and they're just average Joes like me. Okay. That they're farmers, that they just do. That's it. There's not. It's not a. Uh, uh, I view it as I'm feeding my family
Hmm.
and helping others feed their family, and within that time, within that constraint, I'm also hopefully living by principles and guidelines, instructions that God gives to us to say, this is what my people look like. We see that reflected in the traditional things that we see in the movie, the seats,
Hmm.
Shabbat. The Sabbaths are these traditional reflections of those guidelines, instructions, right? Um, and so how we choose to walk that out in a world where we don't have somebody walking up to us and saying, "Follow me," is a different deal, because, like I said, there's thousands that they're believers and they're life givers and they're doers, but they're not the 12. And I don't, for me, and I'm not one of the 12, nor do I expect to be. Actually, I don't want to be. If that's what God does, then there's going to be more of a nudge than that,
Yeah.
um, to do that. But
Because that's
that's
God's
Bob.
life.
That's
Yeah.
Bob. So, and how that plays out. That got a little deep and sidewindy a bit, but uh, in that, in the point that we see here, what we'd love to see here is there's a call, and it's not just to get up and they run away.
Yeah.
That's, we see
Mhm.
this, and then the support that we see from wives and mothers and girlfriends,
Hmm.
right? We'll say the women's support in their lives has been um, Skip Moen calls it the Ezer Kenegdo role. And these women, these three that we're talking about, Mary, I'll even bite there goes there, is fulfilling that role.
Hmm.
And we see that. And I highly suggest, if you haven't, to check out Skip Moen's book Guardian Angel, with and kind of talks about the wives' roles with husbands and
Hmm.
the Ezer Kenegdo role, but that support that we see. So, and I do not have that link in the description now. I'll hopefully put it in later. Okay. Anything else?
Well, I
Biting
could
into
go
sidetracked.
on and on and on because I loved it, but I think I'm ready for episode 6, man. I just I'm I'm on I'm on a roll. You know how I get. I get set in my way. I want to go after, because the story just keeps getting better and better
Well, the
as
pace is going to pick
our,
up.
yeah,
Yeah,
and
the pace is
Jesus
picking up.
becomes, anyway. Yeah.
Jimmy, wait, you're muted. Why? Why am I not hearing you?
Sorry, it was me.
Okay, go
I was
ahead.
clearing my throat earlier, so I muted it.
Oh, muted it. Smart. Go ahead.
Which I have to clear it again.
There you go.
uh, it can be confusing that people will think, that the call of God has to be a specific, call out.
Mm.
And that isn't the case. And I'm glad that you brought that up, because it can be deceptive. And I think that's one of the criticisms growing up in a fundamental church of the charismatic movement, is that we all have to have this, Holy Spirit washing thing go on, and, speak in tongues, and that's going to be the evidence that you're a true believer. And it's like,
Mhm.
no, that's not.
Yeah.
The vast majority isn't that uniquely called. Um, None less important, none less loved,
There you go. That's
but
right.
different in call.
There you go. I like it. Okay. So it's going to pick up. We're going to see, as these episodes get over and the seat that gets up, where there's more uh, urgency going on. It's going to be fun to watch this ramp up. So thanks for being here. This will be another good one. And our point to ponder, let's just walk us this way. Again, just because it's still a good one. It's still a point that we ask ourselves all the time. And that's it. Having been selected as best or most appropriate. And I'm, again, we just talked about choosing and choice, and maybe appropriateness is really more the case. So, with that said, thanks for being with us. And thanks for with us again on another special episode of The Sons of the Father on the Dusty Feet.